You signed the papers, Blakely. It's not yours anymore. You're not part of this family now. Those were the exact words my father hurled at me as he tossed my suitcase onto the porch and slammed the door. Just like that, I was erased. They had taken everything, my inheritance, my name in the will, even the house I grew up in. And the worst part, I handed it all over willingly. Because they said my little brother needed saving. That family means sacrifice. But what they didn't know was this. I'm not just a daughter. I'm a high-level banking advisor, and the truth doesn't stay buried for long when someone like me starts digging. If you've ever been betrayed by the ones you trusted most, this story is for you. Like, comment, and subscribe, because sometimes karma needs a little push. My name is Blakely, and I'm the oldest child in a family that only remembered me when something needed fixing. Ever since I was a teenager, I played the role of the responsible one, the bridge, the fixer, the silent wallet. When my brother Aaron flunked out of college for the third time, it was me who stepped in to cover his loans. When Dad's business nearly went under, I quietly signed over part of my savings. I told myself this was love, that family meant helping, not asking why. Then came the emergency that changed everything. Aaron had been scammed, they said. A bad investment gone worse. The house might be seized. We were out of time. Dad begged. Mom cried. And with trembling hands, I signed the documents they pushed in front of me. Temporary transfer, they called it, just until things settled down. They even swore they'd give it all back. A week later, I was locked out of the family home, my name removed from every legal paper. And Aaron, he was driving a brand new Tesla. But betrayal this deep doesn't come out of nowhere. Let me take you back to how the rot first started in our perfect-looking family. I guess if I had to pinpoint where it all began, I'd say it started with being the responsible one. That wasn't a compliment in my house. It was a job title. From the time I was old enough to hold a broom, I was expected to hold the household together. Aaron, he got to be the baby, the one who made mistakes, the one who just needed time to grow. I cleaned up after him, defended him at school, and later cleaned up his credit card messes when he moved to LA and got involved with shady people and shady schemes. But despite doing everything for everyone, I was ever the one they were proud of. Aaron once stole money from my dad's office, actual theft. And when I found out and confronted him, my mother snapped at me, "Don't pit us against each other, Blakely. He's going through a rough time." I was 17. When I got into a top university on full scholarship, no one even showed up for the award ceremony. My dad was too busy with the store. My mom had to drive Aaron to therapy. So I stood on that stage alone in heels too tight, smiling at a crowd of strangers. That night, I came home to cold leftovers in silence. But I told myself it was fine, that someday they'd see. I moved out at 21 with nothing but student loans and quiet resentment. I worked 3 jobs while in college, library assistant, waitress, and a part-time banking intern. I didn't complain, I didn't party. I built myself from the ground up. I was promoted faster than anyone in my department. Eventually, I made it to internal banking strategy. I dealt with high-stakes clients, complicated legal structures, and asset protection. Ironically, my job was to prevent the kind of shady transfer my own family would later pull on me. When Dad called one evening asking if I could come over for a family meeting, I assumed it was about Aaron again. Maybe another rehab stint, another debt. I drove over out of duty, not desire. And there they were, Mom, Dad, and Aaron sitting around the dining table, like they hadn't ignored me for years. Dad spoke first. "Blakely, we need your help." Aaron got into a situation. Someone scammed him. He used the house deed as collateral. If the bank finds out, we could lose everything. I blinked. What? He didn't mean to, Mom added quickly. He thought it was a sure thing, a crypto thing. The guy ran off with the money. They wanted me to sign a power of attorney and a deed transfer. Temporarily, they said. Just until we moved the house under Aaron's name to protect it. You work at a bank, you know how this stuff goes. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Something was off. Why not leave it under Dad's name? Dad cleared his throat. Because, well, the debts are technically in my name too. But Aaron's clean. We just need to buy time. You do this and we'll fix it together. I looked at Aaron. He couldn't even meet my eyes. My brain screamed, no! But my heart, the part that still longed for approval, said, yes, I was exhausted. I was their fixer. Again, I signed. What happened next was fast and brutal. Within days, the house was refinanced, large sums moved, and then the phone calls stopped. The locks were changed. I came home one evening and my key didn't work. My name had been erased from the deed and family trust. Aaron was living there alone. Mom texted me, "You signed. This isn't your place anymore. Please respect that." I sat in my car and cried for hours, but crying only lasted one night because the woman they underestimated, the one they used, wasn't just a naive daughter. She was also a senior advisor to the bank that held their mortgage. And once I stepped back into my professional shoes, I began to uncover a trail of lies so deep even I didn't expect how far they had gone. The next morning, I walked into my office like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. My heart was bruised, sure, but my mind was razor sharp. And that was dangerous for people who thought they could outsmart me, especially when those people were my own blood. I pulled up the internal access systems for our bank, just routine security reviews, of course. I wasn't using any classified backdoor. I didn't have to. Aaron and my parents had been sloppy. The house deed, now fully under Aaron's name, had been used to open multiple new lines of credit. Huge withdrawals had been made, all flagged for suspicious activity. And what really caught my attention was this: one of the transactions listed Blakely James as co-signer my name. But I hadn't signed anything beyond that temporary deed transfer, forgery. That was mistake number one. Mistake number two, they used my bank. As part of the legal compliance team, I had full access to our fraud protocols. I documented everything, screenshotted every signature, recorded each transaction ID. Then I initiated a formal anonymous inquiry into the account linked to the property. In 48 hours, the bank's internal fraud division had flagged the account. In 72 hours, it was frozen. And within a week, Aaron got a very unexpected phone call from the bank's legal counsel, someone I worked with directly. Apparently, he'd tried to withdraw a large sum to put a down payment on a luxury condo in Miami, but the funds were now under full investigation. When asked to explain the origin of the money, he stuttered. He said it was a family transfer. He tried to show proof, an altered PDF document with my name on it. Mistake number three. I was called in by the bank's senior legal team a few days later, not because they knew I was involved, but because they needed an expert to consult on the internal handling of this highly unusual case. Blakely, one of the directors, asked, "Can you walk us through the family trust situation here? Something doesn't add up. The co-signer seems unaware of the asset movement, and there's a conflict in the digital signature trail." I looked him in the eye and simply said, "Yes, I'm quite familiar with the case. I'll prepare a full breakdown." By the end of the week, I submitted a 27-page compliance report outlining every manipulated document, forged signature, and transaction inconsistency. And I did it all with no emotion, just facts. Dates, evidence, trails. That's when the dominoes started falling. Aaron was called in for questioning by the legal department. The bank demanded immediate clarification on the source of his declared assets and income. He fumbled through lies. Then our systems picked up that he had attempted to wire funds to an offshore account. Boom! Case escalated to federal review. That's when it got juicy. Turns out this wasn't Aaron's first financial stunt. While digging deeper, the bank uncovered previous fraud investigations connected to him that had been quietly dismissed or forgotten, mostly because my parents had been bailing him out for years, using my credit, my money, and my name. I even found traces of my social security number tied to old business licenses I had never opened. Mistake number four. They built their lies on my identity. I confronted my mother. I didn't go to their house. I asked her to meet me in a neutral space, a quiet cafe near downtown. She came looking worn, but still carrying the same tight smile she always used when manipulating me. "I don't know what this is about," she said. "Don't lie," I said calmly. "You signed off on the asset transfer. You helped forge the documentation. You knew." Her hand shook a little as she reached for her cup. We thought Aaron needed a second chance. At the expense of your daughter's future. You're stronger than him, Blakely. You always have been." That hit me harder than I expected. Not an apology, not a denial, just a justification. That was the moment something snapped for good. I stood up, dropped a sealed envelope on the table, and said, "This is the report I gave to the bank. You have 48 hours to get a lawyer." She paled. That afternoon, my father called me for the first time in months. He left a voicemail I never responded to. Something about misunderstanding and family. And please don't let this go public. I blocked his number. Within 2 weeks, Aaron's accounts were frozen, and charges were filed for wire fraud, document forgery, and identity theft. A formal investigation into my parents' involvement followed shortly after. The house they had stolen from me, under legal seizure pending restitution. Karma didn't knock, it kicked the door in. And here's the irony of it all. The board of directors at the bank, impressed by how thoroughly and professionally the case had been handled, called me into a meeting. I thought they'd ask me to step back due to personal conflict. Instead, they offered me a promotion, Senior Vice President of Compliance Strategy. They said, "You protected this institution better than anyone we've seen." I accepted with a tight smile, not because I wanted to win over anyone anymore, but because I had finally reclaimed my power. But success doesn't mean peace, not when the people you brought down were once your whole world. I thought winning would feel like closure. It didn't. It felt like standing alone on the edge of a cliff, wind howling in my ears, wondering if anyone had ever truly seen me for who I was, or if I had just been a tool all along. The promotion came with a new office, a view of the city skyline, and an assistant who called me ma'am. I should have been proud. I was proud on paper. But the truth was, I cried in that new office the first night I stayed late, not because I missed them, but because I finally accepted that they never missed me. That was the real loss. Not the house, not the money. It was the illusion of family I'd clung to my entire life. The silence from my parents after the investigation went public was deafening. No more pleading voicemails, no tearful texts, just silence. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a breakdown, maybe shame. But instead they buried it. They told distant relatives that I had turned against the family for money, that I had set Aaron up. Aaron, meanwhile, posted on social media like he was the victim of a corporate witch hunt. A few of his old friends even messaged me saying what you did was cruel. He's your brother, as if I hadn't spent over a decade cleaning up his messes, as if I owed him my future too. The media picked up the story briefly. Bank employee uncovers fraud in her own family. I didn't give any interviews, but my neighbors looked at me differently. Some congratulated me. Others avoided eye contact, unsure of whether I was a hero or just a daughter with no loyalty. And somewhere in all that noise, the nightmare started. I dreamed of being 16 again, sitting at the dinner table, while my mother cut food into perfect squares for Aaron and served me the crusts. I dreamed of being blamed for things I didn't do, of being told to lower my voice, stop making problems, be the bigger person. One night, I woke up at 2 a.m. with my heart pounding, my breath short. I sat in the dark staring at the wall and whispered to no one, "Why wasn't I ever enough?" It shattered me, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I did. I was too enough, too competent, too composed, too much of a reminder of what they weren't. My strength made them feel small, and so they punished it. I realized I had never actually been loved for who I was. I had been used for stability, for money, for the illusion that the family hadn't fallen apart. I was the emotional scaffolding for a structure that never once supported me in return. One afternoon, I saw my father outside a grocery store. He looked older, smaller. He was pushing a cart with off-brand groceries and a faded baseball cap pulled low. Our eyes met. He didn't speak, but I walked up to him. "Hi," I said quietly. He looked at me, his mouth tightening. "If you came here to gloat, I didn't," I said. "I just wanted to see I don't know, if there was anything left." He let out a bitter chuckle. "You ruined this family, Blakely." I should have expected it, but it still hit me like a truck. "I didn't ruin anything," I replied. I stopped pretending. He shook his head. "You were always cold, calculated. You never really belonged to us." And that was it. The last thread snapped. I walked away without saying another word. My hands were shaking, but not from weakness, from restraint, because part of me still wanted to scream, to beg for answers, to ask why my love had never been enough. But the other part, stronger, now knew that no answer would ever heal that wound, because they had never been capable of loving me the way I needed. Not because of who I was, but because of who they were. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just a single sheet of paper folded once. It was from my mother. "Blakely, you were always smart, but you never understood loyalty. What we did to survive. Aaron needed us. You didn't. You never needed anyone. That's why you'll always be alone. No apology, no regret. Just one last wound aimed with precision." I burned the letter. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, walked to the window, and let myself cry. Not because of what they'd done, but because I knew I had to let them go, entirely. That night I started therapy. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to fix anyone else. Just me. It wasn't instant. Healing never is. But little by little, I stopped defining myself by their approval. I started going out more. I made new friends who didn't expect me to shrink myself. I laughed real full belly laughs for the first time in years. And I finally let myself feel angry, furious even, not just at them, but at myself for allowing it for so long. But I also began to forgive the girl I used to be, the one who just wanted her parents to be proud, the one who believed love meant sacrifice. Because now I knew better. Love without respect is manipulation. And silence in the face of betrayal isn't grace, it's surrender. That moment of clarity didn't just change how I saw them. It changed how I saw myself. Healing is not quiet. It's not some gentle fade into peace. It's messy, loud, full of doubt and backsliding and questions that don't always have answers. For me, it started in the most unexpected place group therapy. My therapist, Marcia, had suggested it after a few solo sessions. I'd scoffed at the idea of sitting in a circle with strangers, pouring out my trauma like a spilled drink. But something in her voice made me pause. "You've lived your life keeping everything locked inside Blakely," she said. "Maybe it's time to let someone else hold part of it for a while." I agreed, reluctantly. At first, I just listened. I heard women talk about mothers who ignored them, brothers who took everything, fathers who only called when they needed something. It was like hearing echoes of my own life in voices I'd never met. Then one evening, a woman named Denise, mid-50s, sharp eyes behind tired glasses, told a story about how she had sold her house to pay her sister's debts. Her sister promised to repay her in a year. It had been 12 years. When she finished, she looked straight at me, and I kept hoping, because hope feels safer than grief. That sentence shattered something in me, because I had done the same. Clung to hope like it was a virtue when really, it was just fear wearing a prettier dress. That night I went home, took out my old journals, and reread entries from my 20s pages soaked in apologies I never received, and plans I made around other people's chaos. I sat on my living room floor, surrounded by pieces of my past, and said out loud, "You deserved better." It felt like speaking to a version of myself I'd abandoned. That moment was the beginning of my decision. Not revenge, not retaliation, but reclaiming my story, my name, my value. One weekend I visited a cabin upstate, a quiet wooden place near a lake. No cell service, no distractions, just me, the trees, and the loudness of my own thoughts. On the second morning, as mist rose over the water, I stood barefoot on the porch, holding a mug of black coffee, and whispered, "It ends with me, the cycle, the guilt, the endless giving. I would not pass this down. Not in my work, not in future friendships, not in any family I chose to build for myself." That same week, I received an offer from a rival bank. Higher salary, global position, a fresh start. I turned it down, because for the first time I didn't want to run. I wanted to stay and rewrite the rules from where I stood. Instead, I sat down with my board and proposed a new internal program, one that offered financial recovery training for clients defrauded by family members. A small thing maybe, but to me it was sacred. It said, "You're not crazy, you're not alone, And your pain matters even if the world tells you to bury it. The board approved it. That evening, Marcia smiled when I told her. Feels good to create from a place of power, doesn't it? I nodded. It feels like I'm finally living for me. Then came the final decision, the one that scared me the most. I wrote a letter. Not to my parents, not to Aaron, to myself. Dear Blakely, you were always enough. Always. They didn't see it not because it wasn't there, but because they chose not to. That doesn't mean it was ever your job to prove it. You get to rest now. You get to love without bleeding. You get to be whole without needing their permission. Love me. I framed that letter and hung it in my bedroom. A reminder that I don't have to keep choosing pain just because it's familiar. I also blocked my parents' numbers. Permanently. That might sound cold, but it wasn't done in anger. It was done in peace. Some people confuse forgiveness with access. I forgave them for myself, but they would never have access to my life again. Aaron sent me an email once, just one line, "I hope you're happy." I didn't reply. Because I was. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing approval or love laced with conditions. I was building something new from the ground up on my own terms. And that kind of freedom, it doesn't scream, it hums, like quiet morning coffee, like clean sheets, like the sound of your own breath when you finally feel safe. But peace, as I learned, comes with its own price, and the final chapter of this story arrived with a knock at my door. The knock came on a Friday morning, a quiet, almost polite sound, but when I opened the door, standing in front of me were two federal agents in plain suits. They introduced themselves quickly, then asked, "Are you Blakely Rain? We'd like to talk to you about the Marcus Rain Trust account." I didn't flinch. Instead, I stepped aside and offered them coffee. The report I had filed with the bank's legal compliance unit months earlier had finally reached federal oversight. With my help, they'd uncovered a network of fraudulent fund transfers, fake medical claims, forged signatures, and even a shell company that Aaron had created to move money offshore, all in my father's name. Worse, the trust my parents pressured me to sign away had been legally tampered with after my signature. I hadn't just been manipulated emotionally, I had been legally defrauded. The agents told me I might be called to testify. I told them I'd be honored. Within 2 weeks, Aaron's accounts were frozen. The luxury car, the high-rise condo downtown, the startup consulting firm, gone. All assets seized pending investigation. My father suffered a public humiliation when his small business was tied to fraudulent funding. Clients dropped him. Suppliers cut ties. By the time it hit the papers, he was taking a leave of absence for health reasons. My mother sent me a letter handwritten. It said, "We didn't know what he was doing. We only did what we thought was right for the family. Please don't let this ruin us." I never wrote back, because they had already ruined me long before the money disappeared. The bank board, who had once doubted my motives, issued a formal apology. They offered me a promotion, full creative control of the ethics division, and a public acknowledgement of my integrity. I didn't smile out of pettiness. I smiled because justice doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with silence, and a locked door no one can walk through again. I was no longer angry, I was simply done. But as I stood in the quiet aftermath, there was still one thing left to say, not to them, but to the person who mattered most. I don't live for apologies anymore. I live for quiet mornings with sunlight spilling across my kitchen table, for friends who speak to me with kindness, for choices made without guilt, attached like a shadow. There's peace now, not because everything was fixed, but because I stopped believing I was broken. I learned that family doesn't mean ownership, that loyalty is earned, not demanded, that boundaries are not betrayal. They are the beginning of self-respect. My story didn't end with revenge. It ended with clarity. I no longer seek closure from people who never offered truth. I created my own. And if you're listening to this and you've ever been made to feel like your worth was negotiable, it's not. You are not selfish for walking away. You are not cold for protecting your peace. You are not wrong for choosing yourself. Sometimes healing doesn't look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like locking the door and never looking back. If this story touched you, feel free to share your own in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, because you are not alone and your voice matters.